the lights go down and I've got a bunch of pointy guitars and I bumped into him. Oh, sorry, man. And then the lights come up for the next scene. He is bleeding, but he doesn't know it, right? The adrenaline. I'm going, oh, man. So there is a real danger to that on stage.
We're totally booked.
Rock and roll!
Well, I think I'll leave you to your reading.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Rock and roll!
We are totally booked.
Welcome back to Booked on Rock, conversations with authors, musicians, and insiders revealing the stories behind classic rock's greatest songs, albums, and artists. And if you're enjoying the show and would like to support it, you can join the Booked on Rock Backstage Pass on Patreon for just $5 a month. You'll get every episode commercial-free and before everyone else. Just use the link in the show notes or visit bookedonrock.com. Now on to our guest, a returning guest. It's been a few years. Sean Kelly is the author of Battle Axes, a hard rockin' history of pointy guitars. He is a Juno-nominated Canadian musician who has performed with Nelly Furtado, Dee Snider, Coney Hatch, Helix, and Crash Kelly. In 2023, he was inducted into Canada's Walk of Fame as a member of Lee Aaron's band. By day, Sean is a music teacher. By night, he writes kick-ass books like his latest, which tells the untold story of the most outrageous guitars in rock history. Sean, thanks for coming back on the show. Good to see you again.
Eric, great to see you. Thanks for having me on.
All right. How's that for an introduction?
Oh, man. You know what? Just like I paid you.
That's right. So this book, not just about guitars, it's really about the intersection of rock history, design, image, innovation, and the musicians who made these instruments iconic. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, those shapes, I think we talked about this when my last book, Don't Call It Hair Metal, came out. It was the cultural zeitgeist in the 80s of, the visual of MTV, meeting this kind of pyrotechnic explosion of commercial pop metal. And those guitars were such a big part of the image and what I associated with that powerful sound. And that stayed with me as I pursued my own journey as a guitar player, from watching JJ French, with his Guild 7/9s, to Eddie Van Halen with his, obviously with the customized striped guitars, and this whole idea of hot rodding your instrument to make it play faster and make it play louder, more distorted. It's a fascinating thing, and it's always stuck with me, those shapes, and really it's funny as a guitarist. I have a lot of guitars. You can see I've got a lot.
Yeah, you got some cool guitars behind you there.
Yeah, man. But, I'm really, where some people are really fixated on, oh, it's got to have these components or it's got to play like this. I see it and I immediately feel a connection through the visual. And it's almost as important as the way it plays. And in fact, I think it informs the way I play the things, the way they're shaped. So I wanted to go in and talk to the people who made these guitars and who played these guitars and what they thought of them. Because, as the 80s kind of fell out of favor, as we dovetailed into the 90s, those guitars became the source of a lot of derision, just like the music itself. And I wondered, and sometimes, we always talk about Les Pauls and Stratocasters as being the classic guitars, and they are for myriad reasons, but I wanted to see how people felt about those guitars that they played back in the day, whether they changed their mind. Some players did, some players moved on to other, more classic instruments, classic. But I think that these instruments, many of them are classics. And when you see what was the inspiration for their development and where it came from, I think I make a pretty good argument for that.
Yeah, and most people think of these guitars as being born in the 80s, but you trace their roots back much earlier. So where does the story really begin?
Yeah, the story starts in the 50s, with Gibson and their futuristic series of, the Flying V, the Explorer, the Moderne, These were instruments that were inspired by the space race of the 50s and that space age design, but didn't really catch on. It was a little too far ahead of its time. People thought it was a little too strange. They were great fixtures for guitar store windows to bring customers in, but the customers weren't walking out with them. And it was only later when players started to see the quality of those guitars and those old guitars ended up in the hands of people like Lonnie Mack, bluesmen, Albert King, people who'd take them out because they love the sound. They can get them pretty cheap. And then later on, guys like Dave Davies pick them up and find them in a pawn shop. And yeah, it looks weird, but it sounds great. It's got that powerful humbucking pickup sound that would come to later define 70s and 80s rock. And then people like, Joel Danzig and Paul Hamer, Hamer Guitars, Dean Zielinski, they wanted to take these shapes and, as arena rock was starting to rise up, all of a sudden you needed something you could see from the back of the arena. And these shapes kind of fit that mold. So it kind of met at the perfect time in the 70s and 80s as rock became more visual.
The Flying V and Explorer were considered flops in 1958. Those two and the Firebird were initially rejected by the market, yet today they're among the most iconic guitars ever made. How did that comeback story happen?
Yeah, I think it does start, like I said, with Dave Davies kind of, picking one up and playing them. Guys like Eric Clapton finding the Explorer and people seeing them live. JJ French tells a good story in the book about going to the Fillmore and seeing players, playing those guitars and being inspired. And then that's the start of it, Then guys like I said, Paul Hamer, Joel Danzig, Dean Zielinski, they're going out and they're finding the value of these guitars. And in the case of Hamer and Danzig, actually going backstage and, selling guitars, getting into the guitar trading business and seeing, oh man, people really dig this Explorer. What if, we made some of these, And that's kind of where it starts.
And Hamer wasn't the biggest guitar company, but maybe one of the most influential. Rick Nielsen of Cheap Trick became one of Hamer's earliest and most visible champs, right?
Yeah, that was huge. And Hamer were very instrumental in the whole guitar advertising thing where, Hamer, the ultimate, taking out those, finding pictures where weren't just a guy holding a guitar, they were action shots, concert photography, putting those into trade magazines and showing the excitement of the visual lines of the guitars and the design and inspiring that excitement into people who would go on to sell the guitars and ultimately the customer.
And that was a small company, Hamer, right?
Yeah. Like all these guys, they started small. They were, one or two guys pounding it out in a shop. I mean, Zielinski, he was in his teens when he started this, driving across the country to go to the NAMM show in Hollywood or in Anaheim and sell his wares. Like big risks. It's a story of innovation. It's a story of risk. It's a story of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, Dean Zielinski founded Dean Guitars in 1977, like you said, as a teenager. And he said that he was tired of seeing futuristic rock stars holding these guitars that were designed before rock and roll existed. Was he one of the first guitar makers to truly understand the importance of image in rock music?
I think so. I think, I'm sure if you talk to anybody in the 50s who saw Buddy Holly playing a Stratocaster, they'd say, hey, it starts there, but really, I think Zielinski, he dialed into, the sexiness of the guitar and that, hey, if you hold this, you might be able to get a girl like the one I'm using in my ad who's holding this guitar. And the sensuality of the instrument, I don't think it was just about blatant sexuality. I think it was trying to make a connection between the sensuality of the instrument and, of course, the added social benefits of playing a guitar that looks cool to meet girls. I think that does play a factor. And Dean admits as much.
And one of the best sections in the chapter on Dean Zielinski is about ZZ Top, how ZZ Top, Dean Guitars, MTV, and the Eliminator album all came together to change rock. And he tells this incredible story that Billy Gibbons recorded virtually the entire Eliminator album with a Dean ML.
Yeah.
And talk about how important was that album, not just for ZZ Top, but for putting Dean Guitars on the map.
It's one of these cross-section moments, right? You have a guy like Billy Gibbons, a known tone aficionado, somebody who is well-respected for his aesthetic, for his playing, for his taste, for his knowledge of how to get great guitar sounds. So he's not only putting his stamp of approval on this brand of guitars, he's taking it into the visual realm where his band is going through a seismic change, where all of a sudden they're introducing electronic dance elements from that is inspired by 80s new wave. That's coming into effect. MTV's giving it a vehicle. And of course, people are going, man, girls, cars, guitars that flip around your belt. I want to be a part of this. Who makes those? It's Dean. Well, that's huge.
And Billy may have unintentionally become Dean Guitar's greatest recruiter, right? It's a great story that he helped put a Dean ML in Sammy Hagar's hands. That's one of the stories in the book. The Dean ML features prominently in the I Can't Drive 55 video. You'll see it there. Can you share the story of Dean, Billy, Gibbons, and Sammy? They're all hanging out at the pool bar, and that's when this discussion comes up.
Yeah. Well, I guess they're hanging out at the pool, and Billy comes with a briefcase because Billy is such a guitar nut. He has a briefcase full of guitar catalogs with him wherever he goes, and he's connecting his buddy Sammy Hagar, who's an up and coming rocker, with Dean at the pool, and it's funny. It doesn't surprise me. I had one encounter with Billy Gibbons. I was making a record with Gilby Clarke, in Los Angeles, and I was at the airport, and I saw Gibbons, and I was a little intimidated. I'm sitting in the airport waiting to catch my plane. I go, I don't want to bug the guy, but then I'm going, when am I ever going to get a chance? So going up and talking to him, if you start the conversation with guitars, you're off to a good start because, man, he just went off and gave me all sorts of guitar wisdom, while stroking his beard. It's like getting the message from the man on the mountain. It was quite wonderful.
As cool in person as on TV.
As cool. In fact, when his handler came, Billy, we got to go to our plane. He goes, just a moment. I'm talking with my young friend here. And I think it was, I was, yeah. And you know what? It's so funny. I asked him to sign something for me, and he wouldn't sign anything, but he pops open this thing. It looks like a cigarette, a cigarette holder, and it's his business cards. He peels one off, puts it in my hand, and goes, use judiciously. I never used it because I had no reason, but I got it. I've still got Billy Gibbons.
Genuinely one of the coolest MFers in rock history, man.
Yeah, man. So anyway, he puts Sammy Hagar and Dean together, and a couple of weeks later, Dean Zielinski's handing a guitar to Hagar, who walks out without trying it really, and plugs it in and tells a crowd of 80,000 people, well, I hope this thing works because, Dean Zielinski built it for me. Here we go. And rips into it and loves the guitar. And, what a great story.
Absolutely.
Like those days of, when we think about today, you think about music and tracks and pre-recorded music, everything. You can't have a mistake. God forbid there's a mistake. The recklessness, the freedom of that time. I think that these guitars kind of fit perfectly. Like they're literally weapons of rock destruction. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, man. Just listening to Triumph's Allied Forces just today, driving home from work, and I was like, I feel like I'm in the room with these guys. It's like you're in the studio and they're just jamming, and you don't get that vibe from the newer stuff. And I'm a fan of, there is new stuff out there that I really like. Don't get me wrong, but
wonderful
but it's
stuff.
so pristine, and you like the mistakes. Leave the mistakes in. We want that.
You know what, man? I'm actually working on an instrumental guitar record that's kind of like a soundtrack to this book, and I just got a deal for it, which is amazing to me that in 2026 you can get a deal for an instrumental record. But I'm grateful for it. But and I'm grabbing guitars from the books, and I'm leaving in the mistakes. I crave it, and I'm not using that as an excuse. Not that there's not a million 12-year-old kids who can wipe the floor with me. I watch them on every morning. I start my day by getting my humiliation and by watching these incredible players. Like I couldn't touch them in a month of Sundays, but I miss the excitement and the danger and the feeling of the very first time you perform something when it's exciting to you. There is a magic in that. And back then, man, you couldn't, it wasn't computers and a million redos. You had a limited amount of tracks. You had a limited amount of time. It was very expensive. And you just had to get it down. And what it was, is what it was. And there's a magic about that. So I'm trying to recapture that.
Sure.
I'm glad you feel that too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, most of that just has aged like fine wine for sure. Quiet Riot's Black Washburn A10 became part of the band's identity. How important was that guitar, not just sonically, but visually, in helping define the image of early 80s metal?
Very. And, I've got a couple of Washburns in my collection for the very reason of seeing an ad with Carlos Cavazo playing that guitar. Of course, I won't give it away too much in the book, but you find out later on that sometimes the guitars they were playing in concerts or in the videos or weren't necessarily the ones that they used to cut the record. But it was huge, man. Like it was that was a great example of a take on a classic design. It was actually an A20, I think he was playing. I think there was a quote in the book that was an A10 that was from an Australian dealer or something. But I think he was playing an A20. But regardless, it's a variation. They're all variations, and I go into quite a great amount of detail about the slight variations. Maybe too much detail, but I'll leave that.
No, man, it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, man. But that was a take on an Explorer, right? So now you get the next generation who are inspired by the shapes, paying respect to them, but putting their own spin, right? And that was a smaller, slightly rounded, a little more futuristic. We're kind of making that futuristic 50s thing more of an 80s thing. It starts to take on its own identity.
Let's go back to JJ French. When people think of Twisted Sister, they picture him with the Guild X79, the outrageous Guild X79. And I love the line where you say,
I got one back there.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool. Nice. The line in the book is great. You say, I like my rock bands the same way I like my guitars, misshapen, sharp, and outrageous. Why were Twisted Sister the perfect musical equivalent of a pointy guitar?
Man, because it felt like it was on the edge. It felt, they were, what I loved about Twisted Sister was they look like a bunch of linebackers dressed as Phyllis Diller, right? So it was already like there was something scary. Like it had legitimate a scary factor, but also had a Looney Tunes factor. Like it felt accessible, but it was the perfect avenue of rebellion for someone who is in grade 6 or 7 who is just starting to feel these things within
That's me,
right?
Present company included.
Yeah, man, you're just starting to feel these emotions and these feelings. You don't know what you're not going to take, but you know you're not going to take it. And seeing those guitars in their hands. And also, I thought Twisted Sister was a perfect band because really, that's a band that's based on a 50s rock aesthetic, right? 3 chords, Chuck Berry riffs, but with this kind of new futuristic thing going on where it's like they definitely didn't look like Chuck Berry. It didn't look like 50s rock and roll. It was something else. So that's why I do think they were the perfect band to kind of introduce those guitars. And Eddie Oeda with his with the bullseye, bullseye Carvel, the colors pink, real men wear pink, right?
That's right. Yeah, I just saw the documentary on Bret Michaels came up. I think it's from a few years back, but talk about look what the cat dragged in that cover. He said,
I think all of us thought they were the hottest girls we'd ever seen.
Right? Yeah.
Guys.
Yeah. He said, Ricky Rockin said, we went in there, thinking we're going to dress up, with this glam look, this kind of glam pirate look, and then CeCe was the one, I think he had some acne, so they had to airbrush him, which meant they had to airbrush the rest of the guys. He said, but when the album came out, we looked at it, we're like, holy shit, this is pretty. What's his name from MTV? Ricky Rackman was just saying what you were saying. He's like, we're all trying to decide which one was the prettiest. He goes, of course it was Bret.
But yeah, of course. But it's funny because talk about a happy accident. That whole album's a happy accident. Like you had a fixed budget. You weren't going in to fix it. Like, that's the artwork, boys. We got one crack at it. That's the way it looks. That's the take, boys. And I thought that record, that's as punk rock to me as the New York Dolls.
Thank you. Yes.
It's punk. It's raw. It's a little out of tune. It's a little out of time, but the songs are so good. And the playing's great. Don't get me wrong. It's just, it sounds like a young band who had X amount of time to get it done, and they got it done. And it had that excitement we were talking about.
We're going to talk about the Warlock a little bit more, but the coincidence of this is so great because I knew I was interviewing you, and I watched this yesterday, and Bret is telling the story, the 1991 MTV Video Awards, when they CeCe just guitar unplugged, and it was just a disaster performance. And that Bret and CeCe, who always got into fistfights after Brett's like, "What the hell, man? What are you doing?" And he thought that Brett made some real nasty comments to him. So Cece, took a swing, and now they're punching each other. And Brett's like, "I'm looking up at Cindy Crawford, and I'm punching," right? But
Arsenio Hall, right?
But he said, I think it was Bobby Dahl, he said, had a Warlock, and he goes, he took this Pointy Warlock and threw it at Cece. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be talking to Sean Kelly about Pointy guitars. These were dangerous, right? I mean, you could hurt somebody with these things.
Dude, talking about Twisted Sister, I was in Dee Snider's Rock and Roll Christmas Tale. So a heavy metal Christmas musical.
Yeah.
If you can believe it. And I had an acting role. I was on stage playing guitar, but also acting. And really, I was playing a character based on J.J. French, which to me was the coolest. But one of the shows, one of the actors, the lights go down, and I've got a bunch of Pointy guitars. I had a bunch of ESP. ESP sponsored the show. We had all sorts, every scene with a new Pointy axe, right? And I bumped into him. Oh, sorry, man. In theater, things are moving, and the lights go down. And then the lights come up for the next scene. He is bleeding. But he doesn't know it, right? The adrenaline. I'm going, oh man. And I literally killed the guy with my axe. So that's a real, there is a real danger to that on stage.
Wow. Yeah. That's
your eye out.
Right. That's the reason they call them axes, I suppose, right? Sean Kelly. Sean Kelly, the author of Battle Axes, a hard rockin' history of Pointy guitars. Metal Method. You described Metal Method as making the dream of becoming a rock guitarist feel attainable. So tell us about Metal Method, Doug Marks, why he connected with so many aspiring players.
Well, yeah, because, it seemed, I don't know how other people felt. It seemed impossible to me, because when I went to guitar lessons, I'm learning Tom Dooley, and I'm learning, Ode to Joy or something, when I'm starting. And I'm going, how do you get from this to there? That doesn't seem possible. And don't get me wrong, I had an amazing guitar teacher, but it was a different method of teaching. You learn the classics, and eventually he showed me amazing stuff. But to get to this thing, I didn't know how. And all of a sudden, you see these ads that are breaking it down into parts. Hot licks in the style of, power chords, how to get a right sound, choosing the right gear, changing your strings, picking the right strings, all these things broken down. Now, it was beyond my financial means and scope. It was actually kind of difficult in smaller city Ontario, Canada, to get things delivered from the States. It was you had to get money orders and things like that, things that were beyond me at the time. So I never actually had a chance to get a Metal Method lesson. But I was so inspired that this guy was breaking it down, at least into digestible chunks of what was important to learn. And I saw this guy carving his own niche. So as an entrepreneur, I was inspired by Doug Marks. He inspired me more than almost anybody without me ever hearing a lick till 40 years later.
Did he present these in book form, VHS videos, audio? How did he package that?
It was cassettes at first.
Cassettes.
You'd get a cassette, but you'd also get a book and you get the material. And I actually you can go to his website. I think it's metalmethod.com. I'm not sure of that. You might have to do a little searching, but you can actually get the classic Metal Method lessons. So I went and purchased it all. And man, the work that guy put in to record all of those things, all of those little components by himself in a little apartment, funding himself, moving from Colorado to Hollywood, setting himself up, and all to pursue his own dream of being a rock star,
Yeah, that's passion and dedication.
Yeah, and very cool. And accidentally kind of becoming a cottage industry, pretty impressive.
So tell me about this V220, because you write that you still find yourself searching for a V220. So what is it about that guitar that has stayed with you all these years?
I was looking for it, man. You know what? It's probably looking in a Hit Parader magazine or a Guitar World magazine, seeing ads with guys like Craig Chiquico, looking so cool with a zebra print paint job on one, but also, Helix, seeing the band Helix in concert, seeing the late great Paul Hackman playing one, watching that guitar literally fly through the air as they were throwing them around their necks and passing them back and forth to each other. It was like, I like smaller compact guitars or something about that I really like the Washburns, like, the State series. I like that. I've got a little mini V that my friend Les Godfrey made me. And I like it's like KK Downing's mini V Hamer. I like that. So that looked like kind of this smaller version of every pointy guitar you can ever want, an Explorer, a Flying V, but had the cool smaller headstock. It just spoke to me aesthetically, but also through my experiences of reading guitar magazines and seeing, Helix in concert.
What made it? Is it hard to find now? Is it out of circulation, or what's the?
I like anything, you can get one like Carvin. That company eventually, the name is now Kiesel. You can get the newer version of it, so I could get it if I want. But I want an older one.
Right.
I'm just waiting for someone to let go of it. And there was a chance I could have bought one, but I bought something else, or didn't feel like it was the right thing to be spending money on at the time, or guitar acquisition is kind of like that magical space where you've got the disposable income, you find the thing that speaks to your heart, it becomes available in the marketplace, especially for an older guitar, right? So it's just one of those things where it's going to happen.
Yeah, well,
I found so many of my little dream guitars from, an Ibanez Destroyer from the 80s, which I did use in my record. And I just found a great 1987 Charvel Model 4 from Japan. And I wanted that because I'd done so much research on the factories there. And it's people. Those guitars were made by people. People were involved in all sorts of people, from marketing people, design people, woodworkers, assembly workers, pickup winders. I love that, all that someone, earned their living and went home and fed their families with that money that they earned making me that guitar that I use on a record in 2026. I find that magical.
Well, if anybody is watching or listening to this and they do know, go to bookdownrock.com and contact me and I'll pass it along.
Thank you. Yeah. Send Sean Kelly. Get Sean Kelly
right?
Carvin V220.
Now, what about Eddie's Shark guitar was so cool. He didn't use it for a long time, but it was like an aqua blue color to it, I think, or I think it was during the Women and Children first tour.
It was a Carina Ibanez Destroyer that at one point he'd painted white, and I think he painted white. But what happened was, he was a constant tinkerer, and he chopped that, he sawed, that jagged shape into the guitar and ruined it, ruined the sound of it. And he had to borrow Chris Holmes from Wasp's guitar. They were buddies in Pasadena.
That's the famous story, yeah.
Yeah, and but it looked so cool, it looked cool, but yeah, he became a genius of guitar innovation by destroying a lot of beautiful guitars, like a lot of people.
Keith Richards is like, he was laughing when he was on Howard Stern and Stern was talking about that. And he said, do you do that stuff too? And Keith's like, hell no, man. I don't. He goes, I'm not taking apart that stuff, man. He goes, they give me a guitar, I play it. Like, he was just in awe of the fact that Eddie would do that.
I'm sure Eddie's had a lot of guitars go through his hands. So, hard to tell exactly what he played everywhere. But there are people who know. One thing I found out about writing this book, I don't know anything. There are people who know everything about stuff. And that's fascinating to me.
Well, I tell you, I just had Chris Gill on, and Brad Talinsky wrote that phenomenal book on Jeff Beck.
I haven't read that yet.
And Chris is that guy, man. He knows Eddie back and forth, but he knows guitars back and forth, and Brad too. But Chris is, he's communicated that with me a lot. And I'm like, damn, man, this guy knows his stuff, man. It's really impressive.
It's funny because for a guy who's writing a book, as big a book as I wrote on this, I don't really care about the technical aspects of guitars. Like, I've got a lot of them. I'm a professional guitarist, so I kind of know I can put it, I can set it up and fix it if I need to, but I bring it to my local guitar store. I've got a great right here because I don't really care that much. I just need it to work.
Right. Well, that's what Keith Richards was saying.
I just need it to work. And how it plays is how it plays. It doesn't need to fit my specification of how it plays. If that's what the guitar does, I'll do that.
Brian May built his own guitar.
Oh, gee. Yeah. Well, he's
Man.
got a PhD in astrophysics. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
some people that have extra gears, right? I'm not that guy. I am Joe Average, if that.
Find the Booked on Rock website at bookedonrock.com. There you can find all the back episodes of the show, the latest episode in video and audio, links to all of the platforms where you can listen to the podcast, plus all the social media platforms. We're on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. Also, check out the Booked on Rock blog, find your local independent bookstore, find out all the latest hot rock book releases, and before you go, check out the Booked on Rock online store. Pick up some Booked on Rock merch. It's all at bookedonrock.com. Speaking of Ibanez, we'll stay on that topic. Def Leppard's Phil Collin and Steve Clark, the late great Paul Gilbert, Stevie Vai, all connected to Ibanez, right? They started out building copies of famous American guitars, but then by the 80s, it becomes one of the industry's biggest innovators. So how did that transformation happen?
Yeah, well, like you said, they were making. What happened was there was also a dip in quality in when companies like Gibson and Fender went corporate. Gibson to the Norland Corporation and Fender to CBS. You're dealing with mass production, and this is a story that goes throughout the book. Once you get into mass production and you're trying to sell more, you got to keep the costs down. There's going to be an inevitable dip in quality. Things are much better now in terms of that, but it's hard not to. You get further away from the original source of inspiration, right? Now you're having mass produced things. The quality control just can't be the same as if you're two guys in a workshop. But Ibanez was making these incredible copies of guitars, and people like J.J. French and Eddie Van Halen, and Steve Plunkett from Autograph, and Chris Holmes from Wasp, they were getting hipped to this fact that, oh man, I can get a guitar that sounds as good as an Explorer, but I can get it for a fraction of the price from Japan. And they knew when the guitars were coming, off the ships, and it hit the kind of, the port cities, the places where the coming across the ocean, and these guitars were making their way through and gaining a great quality, great reputation for high quality. But eventually there were lawsuits, and they had to move on. They had to kind of come up with their own versions of things. So different headstock shapes, variations on the body. And with Ibanez, guys like Paul Stanley came along, and all of a sudden the hottest band in the world is playing, you see the front man playing that guitar, that's going to inspire people, the Iceman, and guys like Phil Collin, they're playing the solo for Photograph and on a Ibanez Destroyer, right? Kids are seeing that. Kids are wanting that. They're associating it with the sounds and the feelings that they're having. So Ibanez was right there, and then they kind of struggled for a while, but really there was a company called Kramer that kind of dominated the 80s because of their association with Eddie. It had the Super Strat thing on lock. It was Charvel and Kramer really were kind of the two big dogs. But then Ibanez came along, and a guy named Steve Vai starts coming along, and then they come up with the Gem guitar, and they become the Kramer Killers, Yeah,
Right.
once Vi kind of came along at an NAMM show, I think there was a big reveal of the Gem with the monkey bar handle, and he was the hot guy at the time. It was the absolute peak of shred guitar, and he had the artistic and commercial dominance. And he was, he had been with David Lee Roth, now he's in Whitesnake, and that's where Ibanez come up, and he came up with the 7-string guitar too, which found a new life with bands like Korn, and later on the neo progressive metal guys. So Ibanez kind of took it and sustained it.
What's the guitar that Eddie used on Summer Nights? And it's also the one I believe that Vito Bratta used a lot.
Yeah, it was a Steinberger. It's kind of like
Steinberger, yes.
the opposite of a pointy guitar. It's like less the headless guitar, right?
The headless guitar, just straight up, and it's a little smaller.
Yeah, it was smaller. Interesting sound. It wasn't made of wood, I don't think. I think it was made. I don't have one, but it had a system called the Trans-Trem system that you could actually play a chord and then pull up on the vibrato bar where the strings sit on the bridge, and the whole thing would move up. So you could move into different key areas. So when you hear Eddie playing it, he can actually pull his guitar up and bring the chorus into a different key than the verse is in, and like anything, he tinkers with it and masters it and becomes amazing at it. It's funny, I was in a band called Four by Fate with two guys he's played with in Fraley's Comet, John Reagan and Todd Howarth. And Todd has a massive collection of those Steinbergers, so he had them.
Yeah, and Vito used it on Wait, or did he?
I think he was still playing his Strats, but then it was more like Little Fighter on.
Little Fighter's the one, yes.
Big Game.
Yeah,
I remember he had one, and played it to beautiful effect. They're incredible guitars, and I've my bass player in the Lee Aaron band, Dave Reimer, he used to have a Steinberger bass, and he said, the trick with that was that, it was a little bit, unbalanced. If you let go, one side would go up, and
yeah,
like anything, you had to learn how to wield it. But at the time, it was a very hot look and sound.
Right. For me, this is fascinating because I'm not a guitarist, so I love tapping into the brain of a guitar aficionado such as yourself. BC Rich they weren't just building guitars. It was creating some of the most outrageous instruments in rock history, like the Warlock we talked about, the Mockingbird, the Eagle. None of them subtle in any way.
No, they have a guitar called the Bitch.
The Bitch.
They were laying it all out there.
You described finally owning BC Rich guitars as a dream come true for you. This is Bernie Rico. This is the guy here. How did his company end up creating some of the wildest guitar designs ever made? What influenced that?
Well, he came from a tradition of great Mexican guitar craftsmanship. They were building all sorts of stringed instruments in the Mexican folk tradition, and so it was all about handcrafted. It wasn't designed to be outrageous or a heavy metal instrument at all. Really, it was more about being ornate, gothically ornate, beautiful instruments that first found their home with session players and kind of heavy 70s guys, and people like Rick Derringer were playing them, and names escape me. Neil Giraldo was a famous guy from Anatar. People like those guitars. Steve Hunter, the guys were playing them because they had so many tonal variations, and that's where they were coming from. Everything was kind of the tools. They made the tools themselves in the workshop that they used to make the guitars. Like, it was literally all handmade, and made these gorgeous instruments. Of course, once again, as things start moving into the 80s, the shapes, guys like Joe Perry start playing them in the 70s, as rock transitions into something different, the people influenced by Aerosmith, guys like Nikki Sixx and Motley Crue, they pick up on that. Poison, they pick up on it, and those shapes fit perfectly with the aesthetic of the time, plus the high build quality, right? So yeah, it was a good time. And for me, I was never allowed to have a guitar like that. If I was going to get a guitar, it had to look like a guitar, or at least look like wood or furniture,
Right.
I think that was the mindset. I had the forces of my parents and my guitar teacher saying, you don't want that pink Warlock, you want this Fender Esprit, which is beautiful and sound. And to be fair, the Fender Esprit is an amazing guitar and probably did sound better than the Platinum Series Bronze Warlock I wanted, but or Pink Warlock, but I really wanted it, and I never had one until years later, and eventually I got an endorsement with that company and proudly played them for many years, and they were wonderful to me.
That's cool. Now we're steering away from the 80s metal guys, but Jerry Garcia's guitar, what is that? Because that's one of the coolest looking guitars.
Oh yeah, I want to say the Tiger guitar. I didn't go into that, but it is like that guy. I wish I knew, and I'm embarrassed I don't. I can't think of his name, but you do see ads in guitar magazines still where you can get that guy to make your guitar.
Wow, it really is one of the coolest looking. It looks like it was just a quick search built by luthier Doug Irwin.
Is it a Tiger? Did he call it?
Tiger,
Okay,
heavily modified, custom built masterpiece with exotic woods. Yeah, it's one of the coolest. Commissioned in 73, built by Doug Irwin. It was Garcia's primary instrument from 79 till 95. Features a hippie sandwich construction of highly figured woods, a maple core with cocobolo maple paddock, and custom electronics with an onboard effects loop. Damn, that's cool.
Yeah, man. Like, guitars like that, they're hard to get into the mainstream because there's so many elements that go into making it. To make that mass producible would require severe cuts in quality and detail, right? And I'm sure that guy doesn't want to let that design go. He probably prefers to stay, I don't want to speak for him, but maybe, where he can
exclusive.
There's an exclusive feel, and that's why, you see the small ad in a Guitar Player or Guitar World magazine, but there's somebody out there who's been a deadhead. I saw a deadhead sticker on a Cadillac,
There you go, Henley.
They got the money.
Thanks so much for checking out the Booked on Rock podcast. If you've just found the podcast, welcome. If you've been listening, thank you so much for your support. And make sure you tell a friend, a family member, share on social media, and let people know about Booked on Rock. And if you do like the podcast, make sure you subscribe, give a 5-star review wherever you listen to the Booked on Rock podcast. We're on Amazon, Apple, iHeart, Spotify, Spreaker, TuneIn, and on YouTube Music. You can check out the full episodes on video, along with video highlights from episodes on the Booked on Rock YouTube channel. Find it at Booked on Rock. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show. It's amazing how many companies are out there, and I hope I cover all of them because the book, it's got so many in there. Kramer and ESP guitars are in chapter 10. This chapter is really about reinvention. He used Kiss and Alice Cooper as examples of the legacy artists who adapted to the guitar-driven 80s by embracing new players, new sounds, and companies like Kramer and ESP. What made those companies so successful?
Well, I think being able to move with the times, and artists who I use the examples of Kiss and Alice Cooper because they were playing, the guitarist in Alice's band, like Kane Roberts, he played a guitar that was literally, he looked like Rambo and was playing guitar that was literally shaped like a machine gun.
What is he up to nowadays?
You know what? He's a very busy guy. He's a writer, producer, smart guy, like one of the smartest guys I had the pleasure of talking to in the book, and really motivated. He does a lot of visual stuff. I can't remember the artist he was working with, but do a search for Kane Roberts and see what he's up to. It's really
talented guy.
Talented. Yeah, and and Paul Stanley and the various guitarists who were playing in Kiss, like Vinnie Vincent, really had, I think, the first commercially available Jackson Randy Rhoads model guitar. He was taking that out, and then later on, guys like Mark St. John, were playing Super Strats, and then you have Bruce Kulick, who played all kinds of guitars, everything from classic Pointy models like classic Gibson V's and Explorers to ESPs to Kramers, Super Strats. So all of these guys were kind of adapting to the 80s reality of high performance guitars, more shocking visuals. Hard to think of more shocking visuals than 70s Alice Cooper and Kiss, but but in terms of the guitars, like Dean said, they were still playing guitars from the 50s.
Chapter 11, Jackson Charvel Guitars, California Screamin'. That's the title. Southern California was the epicenter of guitar innovation during the late 70s and 80s. By the time we reach this chapter, it feels like every road has been leading to Grover Jackson. Was he the guy that finally brought together everything the Pointy guitar had been evolving towards since the Flying V?
Yeah, it's interesting. It actually starts with a guy named Wayne Charvel, who just passed away a few days ago, sadly.
Really?
Yeah, he was a guy who started a guitar shop. He'd worked for big guitar companies in the past, worked for Fender, and he was somebody who saw the value in customizing things that were specific to specific players, so people knew you could go and get a fast neck, from Wayne Charvel. He would do the little detail things that would be specific to each player, and that dovetails with customization of hot rods and things that are happening in California at the time.
Yeah. Definitely remember that name, man. Wayne Charvel.
Yeah, so Wayne Charvel starts it, hires a young guy named Grover Jackson, who eventually, takes over. I'm giving you the Coles Notes version here, but eventually takes over the company, buys it off him, and then goes off in his own direction, taking that lead and making guitars and being a great guy and a mentor and someone who helped players like Carlos Cavasso and Amir Durock from Rough Cut and Jake E. Lee and Warren DeMartini, letting them pick through the scraps, Like it was Eddie Van Halen really starts it all off with that slapping together that Frankenstrat of his with, parts from Lynn Ellsworth and Wayne Charvel, picking little components and creating this thing that's unique to him, slapping Schwinn bicycle paint on it, taping it up and making something, that would inspire countless guitar players. But yeah, Grover's out there, and probably the biggest thing is meeting up with Randy Rhoads, who had previously met with Carl Sandoval and made an iconic flying V, polka dot flying V, but later taking an idea on a napkin, to Wayne Charvel and saying, "Hey man, I'm kind of picturing something like this." With a headstock that's like a Concorde jet, the Concorde, and that Jackson Randy Rhoads has, to this day, is still such an iconic guitar,
Oh, absolutely. I just recently, I've heard for years people say that there was some Connecticut connection to Randy Rhoads. And I finally found out that his dad, when his parents got divorced, his dad moved here to Connecticut.
Oh, really?
And he started a business here in Ansonia, Connecticut. I believe it's Ansonia. For many years, he was teaching guitar, and he was literally, Randy Rhoads' dad was literally living like 45 minutes to an hour from me. And
really?
I can't remember when he passed away, but Randy's mom had her school on the West Coast.
Well, that's what's fascinating. You said the town was called Ansonia?
Ansonia, Connecticut.
The music store, the music school that Randy's mom ran was called Musonia, I think.
Okay.
I don't know.
Isn't that crazy though? Just small world, man.
Yeah, very.
For years, pre-internet, it was so hard to find out stuff like that. And then I found that out. I'm like, damn, that guy was. And you look it up online, you'll see his obits there, and it talks about a little bit of his backstory and the children he left behind. Among Randy is one of the kids. Just, it's a small world. It is a small world.
And it's funny. And when you're talking about details and things, to this day, there's still mystery that enshrouds a lot of these classic guitars, and because guys would hide their secrets.
Right.
Eddie would purposely throw you off the track, right? Like, I don't want you thinking I did this, or this guy did this, and really someone else did it. And people will argue to this day, even, guitar builders, who did what on a guitar, when really maybe an iconic guitar was just another guitar that was going through the shop, and there was someone working on necks, someone working on bodies. Hard to say who did what, but that's part of the fun of it all too, right?
Sure. Well, you end the book by bringing the story back to Canada. So let's talk about that chapter. What role has Canada played in guitar history that you think often gets overlooked?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a guy named Joe Kovacic, Lado Guitars, and he was another one of these very gifted luthiers who came over from Europe, started working in Canada, doing repairs, but had a vision for creating his own, customized, highly detailed guitars. And eventually those guitars got in the hands of some of Canada's biggest rockers, and then moved on to, players like, Adrian Smith of Iron Maiden, using one on tour to this day, Steve Harris from Iron Maiden, and, bands in Canada like, Lee Aaron, John Albany, Coney Hatch, Brighton Rock, Honeymoon Suite, all of our country's biggest, Platinum Blonde. Most of our country's biggest guitars in the 80s at one point put their hands on a Lado guitar. So I thought that was a great story of someone coming from Europe, setting up in Canada, helping, really trying to support artists in Canada, but also striking out and making a mark internationally when bands like Iron Maiden find out how great his guitars are.
The Booked on Rock podcast is part of the Boneless Podcasting Network. If you're a fan of classic rock and classic film like I am, go to boneless.lovable.app to find over 20 great shows there. That's boneless.lovable.app, or just go to bookedonrock.com, the Boneless Podcasting Network. It is what you want it to be. Listen with confidence. The last two questions, I'm looking so forward to this. This is going to be fun. I'm going to challenge you a bit here. First of the final two, if you're creating the Mount Rushmore of pointy guitar players, who would you choose?
Mount Rushmore of pointy guitar players. That really does. But you know what? There's one name that comes up all the time, and it's so iconic. Michael Schenker.
Oh, yeah.
Classic Flying V. They put that guitar, the V, the crotch of the guitar right on his leg and hold it up, and boy, he played it the way he played it. And of course, his beautiful playing. He's a big one for the Flying V. When I think of pointy guitar, I keep going back to those 80s Racer X ads, for Ibanez. So Bruce Bouillet and Paul Gilbert, those guys to me were, in Racer X, the ultimate kind of where punk DIY meets incredible virtuosity, wild colors, wild playing.
So you want to go with both? That would be three.
Oh, I only get two?
No, they'll Mount Rushmore, so you can pick four.
Oh, okay. I got four. Oh, geez. So, okay, I got to think of this now because that's a personal thing. But okay, let's go. Pointy guitars. Let's go Paul Stanley, Michael Schenker. Oh, man. Who's a pointy guitar? This is a tough one.
Stanley, Schenker.
Guitars, he'll come and kill me because he hated all those guitars he played.
Who's this?
What's that? Mick Mars. Mick Mars publicly denounces all those guitars. Let's go Joe Perry in the 70s.
Okay, that's three.
Oh, man, you're killing me here.
What about
Randy Rhoads?
Okay, there you go. All right, last one.
I already hate myself for the 50 I missed.
Right. If you had to name the single greatest pointy guitar ever made, not just your favorite, but the one that best represents the history, innovation, and spirit of rock and roll, which guitar gets your vote and what makes it number one?
The Jackson Randy Rhoads, the Concorde, what eventually became the Jackson Randy Rhoads model. So the second variation of the Concorde, because to me, that bridges everything. Randy, a guy who comes up in the 70s glam scene, pushing the boundaries, but still respecting the roots. Going forward, still looking back, but he's got that lantern into the future. And the fact that guitar to this day continues to end up in the hands of young players as much or more than any other pointy guitar I can think of. I got to go with the Jackson Randy Rhoads model.
Okay. Perfect answer, man. You can't beat that. Battle Axe is a hard rock in the history of pointy guitars, out now. Find it wherever books are sold. Look for it at your nearest bookstore. If you want to find your nearest independent bookstore, go to bookedonrock.com. And Sean, people can find you online where?
Pretty soon you're going to be able to find me at SeanKellyGuitar.com because that's getting made. But right now, Instagram, Facebook, at Sean Kelly Guitar.
Got it. I'll put the links up in the show notes. Sean, thanks again, man. This is great. Good to see you again.
Thanks, Eric. Really appreciate it.
That's it. It's in the books.